You are using the internet, and so am I. What I'm getting at is that the internet is really big, and it's getting bigger every second, with thousands of files, photos and videos being uploaded. At the time of writing this script, hello future me, the internet is 147 zettabytes big. Just so you understand how big that is, 1 zettabyte is 1 billion terabytes. With that much data flying around, it might seem that the internet is invincible. After all, it's spread across millions of servers, data centers and devices all over the world. But what if I told you that the internet as we know it could die? Sounds impossible, right? I kind of suggested this topic in previous videos, like the Dead Internet Theory video, where I talked about bots and AI taking over the internet, and the Vanishing Internet video, and also my recent video about the Internet Archive getting hacked. But I thought a deeper dive into the idea would be quite interesting. So what would happen if the internet suddenly died? Before we dive into the consequences, let's first look at how the internet could collapse. And if you've been following my channel, you might already recognize some of these ideas. 1. Physical infrastructure failure. The internet might feel like an endless digital cloud. Well, it's actually held together by a surprisingly fragile physical network. Millions of miles of undersea cables, data centers, and servers that keep everything running. But this infrastructure isn't invincible, and there are a number of ways that it could fail. The most obvious threat is natural disasters. Earthquakes, tsunamis, or hurricanes could destroy key components of the network. Undersea cables, which are responsible for 95% of global internet traffic, are especially vulnerable. If enough of these cables are severed at once, entire continents could lose connectivity for days, weeks or maybe even longer. But that's not the only risk. There's also the threat of terrorist attacks targeting this infrastructure. And with the increasing reliance on digital networks, cyberterrorism and physical attacks on data centers have become a real threat. We also can't forget about the aging infrastructure. Much of the physical web is aging, and maintaining or replacing it is costly and complex. When servers fail or cables break down due to neglect, it can lead to serious problems. And let's not overlook human error or accidents. Ships dragging anchors have accidentally cut through these undersea cables before. And incidents like these have already led to localized internet blackouts. So if multiple points of failure occurred at once, the internet could experience a catastrophic breakdown. 2. Bots. Another way the internet could quote-unquote die is through the growing dominance of AI and bots. AI is advancing at a staggering rate, and while it's revolutionizing many industries, it's also reshaping the internet in ways we're only beginning to understand. I also touched on the Dead Internet Theory in 2 of my other videos I made on this channel, where I explored the possibility that much of the internet is already controlled by bots and AI. And as AI continues to advance, it's not really far-fetched to think that. We're already seeing the effects. Bots flood social media platforms, influencing likes, shares and even political discourse. AI-generated articles and videos are becoming harder to distinguish from human-made content, and some online spaces are starting to feel less authentic and almost automated. And as this trend grows, there's a risk that the internet could become less of a place for human exchange, and more of a digital wasteland filled with AI-driven noise. If this becomes the dominant form of interaction online, the internet might not die in the way you and I die, but it would change so drastically that it no longer serves the original purpose. A space for real people to connect, create and share ideas. 3. Censorship and Another very real threat to the internet is censorship and government control. In many parts of the world, the internet is no longer the free and open space we take for granted. Countries are increasingly stepping in to regulate and restrict access, often in the name of national security or political control. And as this trend continues, it could slowly fragment the global internet, turning it into isolated national versions of the web. Take China for example. The country's infamous Great Firewall is one of the most advanced systems of internet censorship in the world. The Chinese government blocks access to major websites like Google, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Instead they have their own tightly controlled versions like Baidu, WeChat and Weibo. The Chinese government also heavily censors content to ensure that anything critical of the state or seen as political threat is removed. For Chinese citizens, the global internet as we know it simply just doesn't exist. It's a walled garden where the government decides what you can see, say, and do online. But China isn't alone in this. Just recently, Russia banned Discord. Yes! More countries should follow. The Russian government has been cracking down on internet freedom for years, and in the wake of the conflict in Ukraine, it has escalated its censorship efforts. Platforms like Facebook and Instagram were also banned under the guise of protecting Russian citizens from Western propaganda. The idea here is simple. The more governments can control what people see and communicate about, the more they can control the population itself. Though personally, I think that every country should ban Discord. Holy shit. But even countries like India have enacted internet blackouts during time of political unrest. And governments around the world are grappling with how to regulate the web to protect national interests. Some even argue that this could lead to a rise of the splinter net, where the global interconnected web breaks into smaller, country-specific internets, each with its own rules, regulations and censorship. If this happens, the internet won't really die overnight, but it would stop being the open, borderless place that it was intended to be. 4. Hacker attacks. One of the biggest threats to the internet is the rising frequency of hacker attacks. While the internet is vast, its security is quite fragile, and as more of our personal, financial and government data is stored online, it becomes an even bigger target for cybercriminals. And if these attacks continue to escalate, we could see a future where people will just stop trusting the internet altogether. A perfect example of this was the hack of the Internet Archive. On October 9th, 2024, the archive, which preserves a vast amount of digital history, was hit by a massive cyber attack. Hackers stole data from 31 million users, including email addresses, passwords and all that other stuff. I made a short video about this, so I'm not gonna dive all too deep into this. But this was just one incident among thousands that happen every year. But even major social media platforms aren't immune to these attacks. In 2021, Twitter suffered a high-profile attack, where several prominent accounts, including those of Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and even Barack Obama, were hacked. Hackers used these accounts to push Bitcoin scams, duping people into sending cryptocurrency to the hackers. But this hack wasn't just to steal money, it also revealed how vulnerable even the bigger platforms are to cyber attacks. And it's not just social media. Banks, government websites, and other major online platforms are frequent targets. In 2017, the WannaCry ransomware attack crippled hospitals, banks, and businesses across the world, exploiting vulnerabilities in outdated systems. These attacks don't just steal data, they can shut down entire sectors, freezing services and put lives at risk. Imagine if one day you couldn't access your bank account because the institution was under attack, or if government services were hacked, leading to chaos in crucial systems like healthcare, law enforcement, or transportation. And as these attacks grow in scale, people may start to lose confidence in the security of the internet. If using the web becomes synonymous with the risk of having your data stolen or financial assets compromised, many might simply choose to stop using it for sensitive tasks altogether. Because why would anyone trust banking if your money can just disappear overnight? 5. Solar flares. Alright, let's talk about one of the most devastating possibilities. Solar flares. Yes, you heard me right. A giant burst of energy from the sun could actually take down the internet. Sounds insane, but it's a real threat. And it's way scarier than it sounds. So what is a solar flare? It's basically a massive burst of electromagnetic energy from the sun that can mess with satellites, power grids, and of course the internet. Back in 1859, a solar flare known as the Carrington event hit Earth, and it was so powerful that it knocked out telegraph systems worldwide. Now back then, people didn't really rely on electricity like we do today, so they just repaired the telegraph lines and moved on. But if a flare like that hit us today, we'd be in serious trouble. Imagine waking up one day and suddenly the internet is gone. No Wi-Fi, no data, nothing. This wouldn't be some quick outage that can be fixed in an hour. No, we're talking weeks, months, maybe even years to fix it. The damage would be global. But with a solar flare, it's not just the internet that's down. GPS, satellite communications, even electricity grids could go down. Everything is connected. So while it might seem far-fetched, NASA has actually warned us that we're overdue for a major solar flare. So if it happens, there's not much we can do to stop it. But the internet might survive in some places, but it wouldn't be the same everywhere. Some regions would be hit harder than others, meaning we'd see a fragmented internet. Kind of like the splinternet I talked about earlier, but thanks to the sun instead of censorship. Now that we've covered the why, let's talk about the what. What would the world look like if the internet just vanished? First off, it would mean that I wouldn't have to work anymore, since most of what I do is organized online. Which means I can frolic in the forest all day and be silly. But on a more serious note, the world would descend into chaos almost immediately. The internet runs everything, from banking to healthcare, transportation and even grocery deliveries. Without it, society as we know it would just start falling apart fast. Think about it, without the internet, communication grinds to a halt. No more messaging apps, no more video calls, no more emails. People would have to rely on old school methods, like landlines, if they even work. But that's just the beginning. The real chaos sets in when businesses start to feel the effects. Banks can't process transactions, credit cards and ATMs stop working, and suddenly cash becomes the only way to pay for anything. Stock markets will crash as businesses lose billions in a matter of hours. Without access to their funds, people would rush to the banks only to find out that they can't get money out of them. The global economy spirals into collapse almost overnight. Meanwhile, transportation falls apart as well. Flights are grounded and trains and buses stop running, because the systems that control everything rely on the internet. Delivery trucks? Forget it. Without online logistics and coordination, supply chains freeze. Supermarket shelves start to empty and the 2-day shipping you've gotten used to, gone. And let's not forget about your car. If you drive an electric vehicle, you'd soon realize that many of the features you rely on, route planning, charging stations, maps, even software updates, are gone. And pretty much every modern car would face issues without the internet. The convenience of personal transportation would disappear. But also think about hospitals. Doctors and nurses rely on the internet for medical records, communication between the departments and even some equipment. Without it, surgeries are delayed, critical patient information becomes inaccessible, and chaos breaks out in healthcare facilities. People's lives would be at risk, all because we've come to rely so heavily on being connected. And on a more personal level, we'd lose the culture that defines so much of our daily lives. Social media would be gone. Imagine not being able to watch Hulk Tua compilations every day. But it would also be harder to communicate with your friends. It would feel like the world just got a lot smaller, with everyone retreating to their immediate surroundings, cut off from the rest of the globe. In the end, we'd be forced to return to a completely analog world, just like we lived in the 80s or 90s. And for some people that might sound really great. But like I said, most modern things need internet. So it would be really devastating at this point if the internet would just disappear. Because at this point the internet is just as important to us as fire is. So what would the world look like if the internet just vanished? As we've seen, the impact would be catastrophic. From economic collapse to a breakdown in communication, transportation, and even basic services like healthcare. Our modern world is built on the internet. Without it, we'd be thrown back into a completely different reality, one that many of us aren't prepared for. So the question is, are we ready? Could we survive without the internet if one day it just disappeared? And if not, what can we do to better protect it, or even prepare ourselves for a world without the internet? I'd love to hear what you think. Do you think the internet is too big to fail, or are we just one disaster away from losing it all? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It was quite quote-unquote fun to do the research for this video, so I'm hoping I can make more of these longer videos. Anyways, thanks for watching and have a nice day. And enjoy those Hulk 2